Okay, welcome back to the Snap. Michael Heaver here, of course, alongside my co-host Patrick O'Flynn. And Patrick, we've had a decent response to our previous show on GB News. We have been reading the comments from you guys, so do please keep them coming down below. But Patrick, it seems a lot of people that watch the Snap really welcoming GB News as that alternative to the likes of the BBC now.
Yeah, and it's really making an advance. It's only a week old, but we've had all the kind of in for a dig mockery from the metropolitan left. But I noticed there's a piece in The Guardian today saying that the left can't just mock GB News and treat it as a laugh. They now have to start monitoring it and seriously hitting back against it. And that reminds me about the famous quote that says, first they laugh at you, then they ignore you, then they fight you, and then you win. Well, you know, we've moved on the stages as the left comes to terms with this new entrant, and that's really good. And I think it's going from strength to strength. Whatever the elite says about it, people are watching it, and those who are watching it are loving it.
Yeah, and we had Nigel Farage hosting a show on Sunday with Dehenna Davison on there, the Conservative MP. And it's the first time in a very, very long time, Patrick, where I've actually sat and watched a long piece news programme on TV. And, you know, as people keep saying, it's a breath of fresh air. It's got the media establishment, which is obviously dominated by the Remain side. They're not dominated by left-wing outlooks. It's got them very, very rattled indeed. And as I said, very positive sentiment among viewers of the Snap, that's for sure.
Yeah, and you know they do cover some sort of left-wing viewpoints as well. For instance, they got Rebecca Long Bailey on the Labour Party to raise this issue of cladding and the people who are living in high-rise blocks with dangerous cladding. And you know that's a very interesting issue that you don't tend to hear much about from the Tories. So it'd be wrong to say that GB News is exclusively in the pocket of the political right. I just think it's shaking things up and it's looking at neglected perspectives, and more power to its elbow.
Absolutely. And before we move on, you know, I think that's absolutely right, Patrick. Again, we had some feedback from people who watch the Snap saying they don't see GB News as right wing, they see it actually as quite balanced. And I just think now it's moved things on from that dreary old outlook. And I think it's quite an insulting outlook to insulting the intelligence of the viewer, which is people going on TV, on the BBC and other stations, pretending to be neutral, and then going on Twitter and basically showing everyone what their personal opinions are. I mean, it's a bizarre setup we've had. And I think having, you know, presenters that are able to express openly their view and have it challenged is, I find it a much more grown-up way of doing news. And as I said, someone pretending to be neutral when really you can pretty much see what they really think from their tweets.
That's right, Michael. We've got John Bercow finally emerging now as a fully paid up member of the Labour Party. Well, those of us who watched his antics over Brexit as Speaker of the House of Commons, it will come as no surprise to see that he now openly says he thinks Boris Johnson and the current government need chucking out of office, and that he has a left-wing viewpoint himself. At least he's in a position to be open about that now. But I note the lack of much of a welcoming committee from the high end of the Labour Party. Perhaps they realise his arrival is a mixed blessing.
Yeah, I mean, it's the first time I can recently really recall someone joining a political party and sort of basically it being mocked and not being championed whatsoever, seemingly, by the recipient party. Now, Patrick, you've actually written a piece on this for the Telegraph. Great piece. Do recommend people go and read it. I'll put a link down below. The John Bercow's Defection couldn't have come at a better time for the Tories ahead of the Batley by-election. The move will cement Labour's public perception as being part of an arrogant anti-Brexit Southern elite. And I think that's absolutely right, isn't it? I mean, I don't know what sort of level of public support John Bercow has exactly, but let's not forget, he's joining a Labour Party that just recorded its lowest ever by-election result of 1.6%.
Yeah, and it was interesting that he chose to kind of announce his conversion in the Observer, which again is the paper for just those sort of slightly smug, complacent, well-off Southern liberal lefties. I'm still waiting for the photo call with Bercow and Keir Starmer, either shaking hands or perhaps they could kneel together to send more gesture politics up for the plebs up north. But I just think in Batley and Spen, this signal that you've got the ultra Remainer Brexit blocker joining the Labour Party, which is already led by an ultra Remainer Brexit blocker, you know, two very home counties establishment figures in John Bercow, ex-Speaker of the Commons, and Sir Keir Starmer, QC MP. That's the shape of the modern Labour Party. I don't think it speaks to people far outside the M25, let alone in the big cities and towns of the north of England.
Now, as we've talked about before, of course, the Batley and Spen by-election now fast approaching. A poll out this weekend from Survation showing that the Conservatives are actually on course to gain that constituency, as they did, of course, in Hartlepool. The Conservatives on 47%, Labour 41%, and potentially a big factor in this by-election, George Galloway, of course, he's standing, the Workers' Party that he's standing for, 6% in this poll, Patrick. So, you know, George Galloway could be a major factor in this by-election. But as we've talked about before, I mean, it just seems remarkable to me that after that defeat in Hartlepool, as well as the drubbing that we saw elsewhere, that Keir Starmer really, I mean, where's the oomph? Where's the policy ideas? Why would anyone, frankly, vote Labour?
I couldn't agree more. And the interesting thing is that poll, yeah, it's a shock for Labour, the Tories 6 points ahead, Galloway taking 6 points by coincidence too. But if you look at it, 47 to 41, and there's still 10 odd days, 9 days left of campaigning before polling day, that's potential turn-roundable for Labour if they were operating at full pelt, connecting to the public, having any sense that they had the wind in their sails. But I think, you know, Galloway, whatever you think of him, is showing himself to be a much more crafty campaigner than Keir Starmer. He's the one getting all the press. He's the one who's moving now from the heavily Asian areas of Batley into some of the white working class areas with a message for them as well about anti-woke. And it seems to me that Galloway's share is liable to increase between now and polling day. And there's a whole sense around Labour and the Labour candidate of them ebbing away. So I think even on this one, you'd have expected the National Labour leadership to do things, project the Labour brand in an attractive way in the last week or so of the campaign. And that's not happening. And I think, again, that's Keir Starmer's lack of experience long-term in the political fray.
I mean, I'm seriously questioning now. One of two things I think is really happening. Keir Starmer and the team around him are either so complacent that they think, well, it doesn't really matter. We've got until at least the next general election. I'm not sure that's true. Or in fact, they're so out of touch that they actually think things are going not too badly and there's no real sense of urgency. I mean, Patrick, again, in this Survation poll, the same one that had the constituency numbers there, and this is nationwide numbers now. On the best PM question, this Survation poll, when Brits were asked, do you prefer Boris Johnson or Keir Starmer? Boris Johnson was on 55% and Keir Starmer was on 18%. I mean, this is about as dismal as it could possibly get in terms of personal performance for a Labour leader. And as I said, there just seems to be absolutely no impetus or urgency whatsoever.
No, I think he's lost it. I think he was plausible at the start because of his legal background and, you know, look presentable and all the rest of it. And the British public, as they learnt about him, they waited for the big idea, they waited for the energy, they waited for the passion. It wasn't there. And if you're a leader of the opposition and you get to a point where most of the public thinks you're rubbish, you are not going to be prime minister. you have to be at least nip and tuck with the incumbent Prime Minister throughout, if not ahead. You can't just have the sort of meltdown in support that Keir Starmer has had as leader of the opposition, i.e. the underdog, the long shot, and be thought by a critical mass of voters to be a prospective Prime Minister. It's not happened. It's the equivalent of Ian Duncan Smith, and typically the Labour Party, if we think of it in football terms, is maybe a bit like the old Arsenal in terms of firing the manager, in keeping Arsene Wenger for arguably several seasons too long. They maybe need to get a bit more like Chelsea, dump an underperforming boss, get someone in who can have a go in a different way. And I think that it's so extreme now in the case of Starmer's underperformance that I do see Labour and the Labour Party MPs making a change. And I personally think that Angela Rayner is a bit of a political killer. I don't think she can win a general election, but I think she can project a compelling political personality to get the Labour core vote back on track.
Yeah, I mean, let's see what happens, obviously. But as things stand, my prediction at the moment is that you will see the Tories win that by-election, at which point, as I've said before, I think you're going to see utter chaos and a leadership challenge within the Labour Party. But one thing's for sure, guys, you can rely on myself and Patrick here on the Snap to keep bringing you all the very latest as it happens. So make sure you hit subscribe and the bell so you don't miss the next show. Thanks for watching, and we'll be back soon.
Speak soon, folks.